In this episode of The Creator Experience, we are fortunate enough to be speaking with Chris Ducker, serial entrepreneur, best-selling author, and international business mentor. Chris has been creating content for his business since 2010. He's produced 4 podcast series with another one on the way, and his most recent series has over 8 million downloads and 450 episodes. In total, he's probably produced over 1,000 podcast episodes, and that doesn't include his guest appearances. So Chris definitely knows a thing or two about utilizing content to grow your personal brand. And we talk about that today. Chris shares with us how he uses podcasts to create relationships that help grow his business. We talk about how he uses show formats to stay true to his own style, and he shares how to stay consistent and engaged with your audience. For more information about Chris, head to chrisducker.com, and I hope you enjoy the show. Chris, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. Let's jump straight into it. If you could introduce yourself and your podcast, please.
Sure. Well, I'm Chris Ducker. I'm the host of the Youpreneur podcast, which is just about to hit 450 episodes and 8 million downloads.
Wow. And can you share with me your journey up until the point that you decided you were going to create a podcast? Because there's a myriad of other content methods you could have been using.
Yeah.
What brought you to that moment?
Yeah, Youpreneur as a show is, I think, my 3rd or my 4th podcast, I think. My first podcast I started in April of 2010. And, prior to kind of January that year, the only reason I really used the internet was to build our company website, to check email and watch, silly cat videos, right, on YouTube. And that, I'm being serious. That was literally the only reason I was using the web.
Yeah.
And then somebody, so, you're good on a mic, you're good on stage, you should start a podcast. And I'm like, what's a podcast? And it kind of just grew from there. And over the course of 2010, we went from 0 listeners when we started to probably an average, and it's always very hard to tell in terms of analytics, but I look back probably an average of around about sort of 2,500 people a month tuning in, and it just snowballed from there. And now we're up to, I don't even know what the numbers are now, to be honest with you. But it's been a progression, a progressive journey of taking it more and more seriously as the years have gone by. And now podcasting for us as a company is very much in the middle of everything that we do when we plan out our content quarter on quarter, month on month. And we're actually about to launch a new show as well at the end of the second quarter. So yeah, we love podcasting. We think it's great.
So with that first iteration of podcasting to what you have now, how much has that changed?
Actually, for me personally, not much.
Right.
Except for the obvious, as you grow a show organically, you get more eyeballs, you get more shares, you get more subscribers, et cetera, et cetera. That's gotten obviously better and better and better year on year. But in terms of the production of the show, the planning of the show, not much has changed really that much over the last, I'd say 8-9 years or so. So 12 years in, you you're rummaging around, kind of looking for ideas and what works and what doesn't work for the first little while. And then you get into a formula. And then it got to the point where, I'm not going to edit the show anymore because my time is better spent recording more episodes. And so, for me now, all I do is I make my notes, I prep the show, I make my notes, I record it. And once I'm done with the recording, I dump it into a Dropbox folder and my team takes it over from there. Not everybody's got a team that can do that, obviously. But, for the first 3 years, I prepped, recorded, and edited and uploaded every single show myself. So there's no excuses not to do it if you want to. Not really.
Yeah, exactly. And when you launched a show, did you identify your target market first? Did you look at other people for style ideas so that you could achieve that target audience?
They were already with me.
Right.
So, there's a couple of ways to kind of start a show. You can either just start it from scratch and you're trying to attract people at that point from day one, right?
Yeah.
Or you can start a show after you've already built a following of some variety. So whether you've built it on, somebody else's platform like Instagram or YouTube or something, or whether you've built it on your own website through your blog, your email list, etc. They're really the only two ways, the two situations that you'll have when launching a podcast. For me, when I launched even the first show, I'd been blogging for about 6 months or so prior to the podcast coming out. And so I already had an audience to launch it to, which definitely helps. Let's not kid around. It definitely helps. But with that being said, again, if I had to pick now, if you've got an established audience of any size, and you know who you're serving already, a podcast for me is, the biggest asset that you can create from a content standpoint, because the audience already knows and likes you. You don't have to worry about overcoming that hump, right?
Yeah.
That hurdle on the show itself, because you know who likes you, you know who you're creating the show for, and you just go forth and do it. The great thing about podcasting is that if you look at, say, YouTube, for example, we talk about content in general, but YouTube, the average view time of a YouTube video is, 6-7 minutes max. And that's across the board. That's everything from 1 minute short to, 4-hour Joe Rogan, podcast episodes, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about the fact that the average is only 5, 6, 7 minutes or whatever it is on YouTube, and then when you look at podcasts and you realize that the average listening time is about 30 minutes, the connection that you make with your podcast listener rather than your YouTube viewer, in my eyes, my humble opinion, is much, much greater. And because of that, because we talk about it from creating content from a business standpoint, the ability to be able to create that relationship and ferment that relationship and grow that relationship, for me, is a much shorter sales process due to the fact that they're spending so much more time with you in their eardrum, so to speak.
They've already made that commitment almost.
Yeah.
Those touch points have just been dealt with.
That's right.
You talk about your audience that you brought to podcasting. Did you find that you fostered a new audience through podcasting that you weren't expecting? Any sort of target demographics that came out of the woodwork? They were like, I actually helped these people with my podcast. I wasn't expecting that.
That's a really interesting question, because I've always, when I say I've always, I would say probably over the last 7 or 8 years or so, it was becoming more and more apparent to me that I was connecting better with a slightly older audience, so kind of mid-40s and above, right? And I'm 49 myself this year, and so when I first started out, I was just podcasting for anybody that wanted to listen, right? But once you realize who you're really helping, then you shouldn't ignore it. You should start dialing down your message, start dialing down the topics you talk about and things like that. And so I started doing that about probably 5 years ago, really seriously, strategically. And the really interesting thing was that I was actually attracting more middle-aged women than I was middle-aged men by quite a lot, 65%.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to think it's because of my strikingly good looks and wit and charm.
We're talking about a podcast here, but
I'm not completely convinced that's the case. But nonetheless, ladies, I'm more than happy to entertain you if you feel the need to be so.
So let's talk about the product then, because like you said, you dial down on that target audience. How do you shape? Can you share with the listener sort of what your format is and why it is that format?
So there's 2 different types of shows. I'm a natural talker rather than a typer. So podcasting is perfect for me rather than blogging. I don't think I've written a blog post for about 7 years now, even though we publish one almost every week. My team does it all.
Sure.
But 2 types of format. The first one is a solo show, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's me, usually riffing for around about 15 to 20 minutes, absolute max, on one topic or one situation. Maybe there's a question that's come in and I thought, oh, that would make a good show. I'll go and make some notes and just record it. Maybe sometimes, it's a little bit more strategic than that. Maybe we've got, an event coming up or a program or a product launch coming up that, I want to be kind of a little bit more front and center because, people make a buying decision based on their relationship and perception of me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the solo show. Mm-hmm. And then we have the interview format, which when I started podcasting for the longest time, actually, I could probably count on one hand how many solo shows I recorded up to maybe 2018.
Really?
So it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Almost everything I did was interview format.
Yeah.
And quite selfishly to begin with, because I was like, well, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I know quite a lot, but I don't know everything. And so why not invite people onto the show that do know what I don't know, and I'll just grill them in a free consultation session fundamentally, and then, publish it for the world, right?
Yeah.
And so that, that's always been my kind of thing. But yeah, the solo shows, I think what's happened is as we have become more and more focused on growing our own coaching and mentoring services and programs, the team was quite honest and said, like, Chris, you need to be more front and center. You need to show people that, you're a true expert in your niche as well.
Yeah.
It's great to have all the guests coming on, but people need to see you as, the expert as well as just the podcast host kind of thing, which makes total sense.
Yeah, sure.
Complete sense. And so we made that tweak, and now it's basically a 50-50 split between the two.
Very nice. And it makes kind of sense, doesn't it? It's exciting to network with podcasting. It's a real common example. People said, I'm talking to people that I've never spoken to before.
Exactly. And it's done more for me from a relationship building standpoint than any other, activity that I've gotten involved with. I mean, some of my closest friends I met through podcast interviews, some of my, my mentors, my personal mentors, business mentors, I've met through podcast interviews. So it certainly has helped to create that kind of 6 degree of separation in terms of my network and, the people that I get to call friends nowadays, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. I remember meeting you at New Media Europe in 2016, I think. And it was amazing.
Yeah, I remember I did the closing keynote at that.
Yeah. Such a community. I volunteered, and I was made to feel so welcome. And we were a fledgling podcast enterprise at that time. And everyone was so welcoming, and everyone was really willing to hear your story to then offer you something. Just whether they don't like take you under their wing or anything, but just a little bit of advice and making you feel safe. It was awesome.
Well, they say a good interviewer, podcast host, chat show host, what label you want to use, they listen twice as much as they talk, right? And so when you're in that environment where many people are in the same game and they understand it and appreciate it, and what goes on kind of behind the scenes, I think you're more likely to find people that really kind of get it.
Definitely.
They respect it,
So when you launched your podcast to now the purpose of your podcast, what are your determinants for success, and have they changed over time with it?
No, it hasn't really changed at all. There's two things. It's number one, engagement, and number two, downloads. That's always been the two things that we have focused on above and beyond everything, and in that order as well. I think a lot of people, they start a show and they kind of obsess over their download numbers just a little bit too much. And they really don't mean anything at all unless you're getting engagement from your listeners or your viewers, if you've got a video show as well, right? Like, no point in having 10,000 people downloading every episode of your show if you're only getting one email a week from them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we really look at the engagement side of things. And if we have almost every episode, there's a call to action of some variety, whether it's hit me up on Twitter, let me know what you thought. Make sure you use, episode 480 or something like that, and just really sort of try and figure out where people are tuning in from, where, and I don't mean what app they're using. I mean, like, where are they
Right.
when they're listening to the show? Like, I sometimes start the show by saying, I appreciate there's a ton of shows that you could listen to, but right now you're choosing mine.
Yeah.
Do me a favor. Send me a message on Instagram. Let me know where you're listening to me right now. I'd love to know. You'd be surprised, Matt, just how many people every month reply to that particular call to action. I'm in the gym. I'm walking the dog. I'm in the bath.
Really?
You'd be really surprised. So now I know that, not only is my audience 65% middle-aged women, but quite a few of them actually listen to me in the bath, which is quite interesting.
Nice. Well, that could have been one of your determinants for success when you started, right?
Yeah,
But
I'm going to put that one right up there with engagement. And download numbers now.
Where are they? Are they in the bath? I mean, they can't get away. No. That's fantastic. Let's go into the content creation side. This is a big one. When people are starting out, they think it's going to take forever. Some of the creators I've spoken to, it does take forever, and they really put their heart and soul into it. So can you share your process of creating a podcast from idea to ear, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has become more fluid and easier over the years. Like with anything else, with repetition, with practice, with consistency, you just get better and better at it. If I'm doing a solo show, for example, all I really need is a Post-it note and my pen, and that's quite literally my prep for it. I'll think of what topic I'm going to talk about. I'll make usually no more than 5 bullet points, and I know that, out of those 5 bullet points, intro and outro, I've got a 15-minute show ready to go.
Yeah.
Simple as that. But that's because I've done it over and over and over again. We're up to 450 episodes of Youpreneur. There was probably at least another 250 episodes of the other 3 shows that I've been involved in over the years as well. So that's, 600-700 episodes recorded just on my own, plus well over 300-400 interviews over the last 10 years as well. So we're talking well over 1,000 podcast episodes across the board, and it just becomes easier. So the simple thing that I would suggest to anybody when they're thinking about potentially recording a solo show specifically is just to understand that it's much like a book. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so, I'm not quite sure who it was that said this. It might have been Jim Rohn, and I might be paraphrasing slightly here, but I believe he or somebody very smart once said, tell them what you're going to say.
Thinking the same thing.
Then say it, and then tell them what you're told, or something to that effect, right? And so that's it. That's your beginning, your middle, and your end.
Yeah.
But also with context behind it. It's not. Today, I'm going to share with you my top 3 tips for writing a blog post that will go viral, and then you go into your 3 tips. It shouldn't be about that. It should be. Did you know that there's over 4 billion blogs on the web, on the internet? One of the easiest ways to be found via Google is to have a blog post that's been crawled by them, which pops up in search results. So if you're not blogging already, you should be. And today I'm going to give you my top 3 tips to get started with blogging.
Right.
See, the context is there. Now I've sucked them in.
Yeah.
They know exactly why they need to listen to me. And I think that's the big thing. And a lot of people skate over that initial little bit of, feedback or extra that you've got to include.
Yeah.
And so, that's it. Your beginning, your middle, your end. And understand also that not everything you say, not every episode that you publish is going to be amazing. But, better done than not, right?
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that's key that you raised, the point that you raised there, which is the identification of the problem and then the solution. I think there's a lot of content creative that is just the solution. And if people don't even relate to the problem or didn't identify the problem themselves, they're just going to skip past it and they'll never know the power that's there.
And if you know your avatar properly, if you know your target market properly, you can always find a way to make it relatable with your language, right?
Yeah.
So, you skip that first part, you do it at your own peril, as I always say.
Yeah, take them from point A to point B, be along that journey. Yeah. I want to go back to the other podcast that you've done, because I think that's a really interesting point. There's the term pod fade. People are afraid of failing, so they just don't start stuff. And I think that content creation is putting yourself out there, it's exposing yourself. People don't want to do that and then fail. But you've reiterated or been part of 3 other podcasts prior to the Youpreneur FM podcast. Can you explain why those stopped and about those transitions between different identities or brands?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, so the first one was Virtual Business Lifestyle. That was 2010. We went for about, I think, 150 episodes. So, a couple of years or so, maybe a bit more. And, that show kind of ended because the focus of that show was more towards kind of the 4-hour work week buzz, which was all the rage when I started it. I don't have any issues admitting the fact that I was riding on those coattails, Thank you, Tim. And so, we would talk about automation, delegation, outsourcing, typical kind of, right out of the book.
Yeah.
And it worked brilliantly. And then it kind of didn't.
Right.
And it kind of it didn't fade out, but it became less, I guess it became less, not necessarily less listened to, but it was less talked about.
Okay.
And I think the fun of doing it kind of slowly became less and less of an importance to me.
Right.
And so, when you start doing things for other reasons, than either having a good time or making money, and you're just kind of doing it because you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
That's not a healthy situation. So
definitely not.
I wrapped that up. And at the exact same time, almost, my first book, Virtual Freedom, which was on the subject of building virtual teams, was coming out. And I said, okay, well, I know I can reach an audience with this. I do not want to run a podcast that's focused on working with VAs.
Right.
However, I know that podcasting works, and I know that I can get a good amount of buzz around the book launch. And so what we did is we had a limited 25 episode run, and you can still find it on iTunes, I think. 25 episodes. We recorded them all in the space of like 3 days, batched a whole lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was just one question, one answer, or one topic, one problem, one solution per episode. And I just picked 25 of them out of the book, really. And I think we kind of did the first half, went live before the book came out.
Right.
And then the second half carried on dropping week by week after the book had been released.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of timed it to the point where it was like, by episode 12 or whatever, 15 or whatever it was, the book is now out. You can get it all good bookstores, Amazon,
Yeah.
And it went gangbusters. We sold like 9,000 copies of the book in the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
And everybody loved it. It was great. And so that was the second one. And then the third one that I did was One Day Business Breakthrough with my buddy Pat Flynn.
Okay, cool.
He and I did a couple of events where we would work with entrepreneurs in an intimate environment for the day. And then somebody said, guys, this is so good. You guys should turn this into a show. And we're like, okay. So we did an episode, or rather did a season of it. I think it was 20 episodes, and then we did a second season, and then we did a third season. And by that point, we were both kind of done with it.
Yeah.
Not because we didn't like each other anymore, but because kind of, it became repetitive to us, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And so we kind of just wrapped it up, and Youpreneur kicked off, and here we are 450 plus episodes later.
Very nice. I think that's
So there you go.
Yeah. It's just a great example.
I guess the overarching kind of piece of feedback here is that just because you start a show, it doesn't mean that it has to last forever. Like, you can sunset it at some point in the future if you want to, or even rebrand it and pivot in a slightly different direction with it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big common misconception, that it has to just die, or that point of failure is something that I think just gets in the way so often. I hear people, oh, well, I don't know if I can do more than 20 episodes. Okay, well, don't. Maybe make those assets part of your business assets, and they can become a resource. Basically what you did, you used that second podcast as a marketing, pyramid, basically. Build the audience up, present them, keep that engagement. That's it.
Yeah, because,
guys,
the big thing with that was that, when the book came out, what was it, $14, $15, $16 or something? You've already helped them to a certain degree. You're not asking them to buy, a $5,000 course or something like that. It's like, if I've helped you in any way, shape, or form over the course of this show, and you want to dive on the subject a little bit deeper, understand I've just been scratching at the surface here.
Yeah.
So pick up the book. It's $15. I'll appreciate it. My publisher will appreciate it, and you'll get lots out of it. I promise. Who's not going to drop $15 on a book?
Yeah.
So,
You highlight there the engagement again, how important it is to engage with your audience. Where do you engage? Where do you want your audience to engage with you from your podcast? You've spoke about calls to action.
Yeah. So there's really two places that I focus on. The first one is our email list. It's the biggest asset that we have from a business standpoint. And then the second one is it's a toss up between Instagram and Facebook. They're kind of like the two big networks where we know a lot of our prospects and our customers are. I personally spend way more time on Instagram than I do Facebook. The only reason I'll ever log into Facebook is to check into our private client groups, like the incubator group and the roundtable group for our higher end guys. That's literally the only reason I'll ever sign into Facebook. Everything else that you see coming from me on Facebook is run by my team. But on Instagram, I like to hang out. You can hang out in the shadows on Instagram. You can be a little creepy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true to find just one platform that you can concentrate on, or just two, so that you're not overwhelmed. Have you tried Twitter and LinkedIn, which seem to be the other ones out there?
Yeah, we have. Yeah. Twitter moves too quickly, I think. I don't know. I think that might change a little bit in the future with our demographic. I don't know exactly. LinkedIn tends to be too stuffy. I'm a professional guy. Don't get me wrong. Like, I haven't built 3 multi-7-figure businesses by not being professional.
Yeah.
But I'm not stuffy. I'm not elitist.
Yeah.
I'm not, I like to think I'm not boring. So, for me personally, LinkedIn come across to me kind of just as a little tiring, a little boring.
Yeah.
So, I like to hang out with the cool kids, and here's the thing, like when I say on the podcast, particularly if I say, and I do this in emails as well, if you got a question, send me a direct message on Instagram. I will get back to you personally.
Yeah.
I promise it will happen. And so when these things come through, and I'm not in there every single day looking for it, but like once or twice a week, I'll go into my message request tab and I'll just fire off a whole bunch of replies in like half an hour.
Yeah.
And sometimes I even get replies back from people saying, oh yeah, I bet this is just Chris's VA, that's or one of his team members or something like that.
Yeah.
So what I do is I shoot personal videos to them.
Nice touch.
And I reply to them and say, no, Matt, it really is me.
Yeah.
Like, it's me. Hello, is anybody home? That sort of type of thing. And they kind of they realize that, I stand behind my word,
Yeah, that's a really nice touch. And standing by your word, I want to circle back to you currently don't edit your podcasts, which is a bit of a bone of contention between people that want to curate their message. Also, when people are starting out, they're worried they're going to look or sound a certain way, and editing allows you to curate that image, which is important for some people, especially if they're nervous. And then you've got the staunch sort of old guard, which is get it out there, be raw. This is what podcasting is about. It's about what happened there and then. Be honest, be emotional. People make mistakes. But you did edit in the past, but now you don't edit. Can you talk about your opinion on editing?
Even with the edits that we did, I mean, that was literally in the first show. And even they were really minimal as well. Like, either I would completely mess up or the guest would completely mess up and say, oh, can we have a do-over?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or maybe, back in those days, we were recording everything via Skype with call recorder.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes you might have a tech snafu and you have to disconnect and reconnect. So there was, some editing involved. But I don't think we've edited the show other than dumping the intro and the outro with the audio in the middle,
Yeah.
and then cutting those together.
Yep.
And then once they're cut together, we then what's the word? We balance all of the audio out
Sure.
between guests and things like that. But I mean, that's post-production stuff. I wouldn't call that really hardcore editing. I don't think I've edited a show since probably 2013,
Right.
something like that. So I think the reason why also is that my style is very conversational.
Yes.
And I think if I was to edit myself, that would become unnatural sounding to anybody that really knows me. And, I just, like, sometimes I'll say, I'll end a sentence with something like, and that's why you do have to do that. Oh, whoops, I just said do on a podcast, but I'll keep it in. I don't try and edit it out because it's my style. So I think you've got to be true. I'm not going to use the word authentic because it's overused, but I think you've got to be true to yourself and what you're all about and how you come across to your people as well.
Yes.
Like I always say, your vibe will attract your tribe, right? And so if you're really kind of like wanted to be seen and known as somebody who's like really on the mark, it's word perfect, then you're going to edit the crap out of yourself. But if you're a guy that's very chatty and conversational, then you don't need to worry about it at all. Yeah. I'm lucky like that.
Yeah, and then we need to caveat that you are a professional speaker. You are incredibly good at what you do. And you've already hit the topic like ahead of time. You've planned, you've ruminated, you've had discussions with people. These are things that you are in a position to reply to very promptly, very professionally. I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe jump on a microphone and waffle. And then at that point, I would say you need to consider your listener. Is talking about the weather at the beginning really relevant? All the personal stuff, do we need to be talking about things that aren't evergreen, politics, geo issues? Maybe your audience needs to be treated better. And that's why I would suggest editing for people.
And just don't, just stay away from stuff that you don't know enough about as well.
Yes.
Like it's, like I would never anticipate doing a solo show on Facebook ads, right? Or copywriting or, something with a skill set like that because I'm not good. Like I don't know enough about that stuff.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll bring Amy Porterfield in to talk about Facebook ads, or I'll bring Ray Edwards in to talk about copywriting, or Sean Kennel in to talk about YouTube marketing. Like, if I don't know, I don't know, and I think I'm.
It's being honest to that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just smart enough to know that you shouldn't open your mouth unless you know what you're talking about as well.
That is key. Yeah, the smarts. It's important to have the smarts, definitely. Chris, this has been awesome. I just want to wrap up with some of my sort of ritual questions to get some insights. I'm going to start with: do you have any podcasts or content that inspires you, and why does it inspire you?
Who do I listen to regularly? I can honestly say I don't think I actually subscribe to any shows anymore.
Really?
But I'll dip in and out of shows and listen to certain subjects. There's one that I really do love listening to quite regularly. It's Work Hard, Play Hard by Rob Murgatroyd.
Okay.
Every Friday he does an episode with his wife, Kim. And the two of them are just hilarious. And, they talk about business and life and kids and all this kind of stuff. But, they can get into it a little on air. You know what I mean? And it's quite interesting. It's bloody funny because they're just both very funny guys. So I like that show. I don't think I've ever kind of like tuned out of listening to friends like, Amy and Pat. Not only just because to kind of just genuinely to stay up to date with what they're all about and where they're at, but also because, when you're at this level, you're very, very blessed to be able to attract people that are incredibly smart to come onto your show. And I think that's also something that, I will never take granted ever as a podcast host. Like if I reach out to Gary Vaynerchuk and say, Gary, can you come back on the show? You've not been on for a couple of years. Like, I'd love to be able to discuss, And he says, yes. Like, I don't take that just because there's camaraderie there. I won't take that for granted and just assume that he's going to say yes.
Yeah.
Right? We did a special training with Lewis Howes inside of the incubator about a year or so ago. And, we booked him for an hour. He came on and we ended up going for like an hour and 45 minutes.
Good man.
And he was just like, no, I can stay a bit longer. I can stay a bit longer. And even though we're friends, like I just don't assume that people are going to be cool to, to cut out their time like that. So yeah, there's a few people, but I honestly say I don't actually subscribe to any shows anymore at all. I just dip in every now and then.
Fair enough. In your opinion, what is the hardest part in podcasting?
I think probably consistency.
Okay.
I think a lot of people struggle with that. I did struggle with it until I discovered the power of batching many years ago.
Yeah.
And now what I tend to do is I'll usually batch a minimum of 4, sometimes as much as 6 episodes in a day, and then not have to worry about it for 4 or 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Like literally earlier on today, I did 4 episodes of the show. So I think because consistency will kill a show before it's ever really kicked off properly. If you're not consistent and your people aren't expecting that show to drop same time, same day, same bat channel, then they'll just tune out and find someone else to listen to you, no matter how good you are. And so I think consistency is the biggest thing more than anything. But try batching; it really works for me.
So in line of English, Gene, talking about consistency, how do you stay accountable then? You batch, but how do you maintain that you get those batches done, that you don't have 3-4 month hiatuses because you've gone to series?
Well, my team helps with that. There are people on my team that are hired very specifically to do certain things as part of their role.
Right.
And if one of them is to do the final output of the podcast and write the show notes and upload it.
Yeah.
And they don't have episodes sitting in the Dropbox folder. They'll be quick to tell me.
They'll be on you.
Yeah.
So during your
so I pay people. Basically,
they're demanding.
Keep me accountable is what
they want it. During your time podcasting, what small change have you made that's made a huge difference?
Definitely just tech. I think.
Tech. Anything specific?
Yeah. When I first got started, I was using my Apple microphone on my Apple headphones. Oh, really?
The little white, dangly, scratchy. Nice. Thanks.
Showing my age now, right? We're talking like the first 50, 60 episodes.
They're still a guest favorite, though.
Right. Oh, yeah. And if I was wearing a shirt like with a collar, and I was doing it a lot of the time because I would record them in the evening at our call center facility with people on the other side of the way. This is when I was still living in the Philippines. Yeah. The mic would sometimes bounce up against the hard collar on my shirt and you'd hear all this, in the publisher. It was absolutely horrible. And then I got just a simple USB mic that cost me like $30. And I was like, this is great. And, now I'm recording stuff and I'm holding the mic and I'm like a stand-up comedian and stuff like that. But it was really kind of, I would say probably about 5-6 years ago, I invested in an XLR with a audio recorder. I can't remember the box that we used. I now use the Rode Procaster and everything goes into that, which is phenomenal. But just getting a really, a good mic. I have 4 acoustic panels right above my head here. We've got a vaulted ceiling in this room. Yeah. So, there's that chance for echo. So they kind of are right here. And I mean, I think that I've dialed things in tech-wise pretty well and the sound comes across nice and crisp now. So yeah, tech, spend a bit of money.
Especially, I think, people find their feet and then invest the money. Don't be afraid to get going.
You don't need the all singing, all dancing setup for episode 1. But by the time you get to episode 50, if it makes sense to do it, then by all means, spend a bit of money.
That 1% better every time, isn't it? What advice would you give to new content creators or those people sitting on the fence?
Just to get started, I think what happens is that we become paralyzed a lot of the time when it comes to content creation and marketing because we think that, well, who's going to listen to that or who's going to watch this or who's going to read that? Something really special actually happens at about the 6-month line.
Okay.
What we do, and I've seen this over and over again, so I can talk quite confidently about it, is that when you get started at the very beginning of your content creation journey, you'll create content that you think people will like and will want to hear from you, right? Think is the key word there. Yeah. But then after about 4, 5, 6 months, we built up a bit of an audience. You've starting to engage with them. They start telling you what they want and what they hear and what they don't like and what they love. And what happens is you can then make this very small little shift in going from this is what I think they need to this is what I know they need. And at that point, you can really start to see some genuine fruits to the labor.
Yeah.
But at first, you've just got to go out there. You've just got to get going and just stay consistent. It's the biggest thing more than anything.
Yeah. And you demonstrated there that the pressure relieves itself because you start to get that engagement. You know what people want to hear. You know that you're hitting the nail on the head because you've been asked to talk about it. Yeah, brilliant. What 3 values do you want to be known for through your content creation?
I think...
Not authentic. We're not using that word today.
No, we're definitely not using that word. I think kind of, my own style, kind of like no BS, right? Telling it how it is. Yep. I guess I don't do rah-rah at all. It's not my, that Tony Robbins can handle that stuff. I just keep it real and just talk from experience.
Yeah.
And from a place of, I hope, and this is another word that's getting thrown around a bit now, but like just empathy, like being empathetic towards other entrepreneurs who are on the journey.
Yeah.
Jack Lemmon, the American actor, said it better than anybody else. He said, when you get to the top, you got to send the elevator back down.
Yeah, yeah.
And so whenever I work with somebody or coach somebody, even if I'm just being interviewed like this, I understand who's listening in or watching. Like, I just want to say, even if the elevator just goes down by an inch, I'm happy because having that empathy for other entrepreneurs, I think, is very, very important. But also keeping it real and just being yourself along the line of that kind of journey that you take is equally as important as well.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing a great job of that. And my final question that I'd like to finish with is, what do you think makes a good leader?
I think a good leader continues to learn. I think that a good leader has to continue to learn in order to continue to lead.
Yeah.
I think if you get too comfortable and you start resting on laurels, that's when you become expendable. That's when you become, that's a slippery slope. So you got to, consistently upgrade yourself and read and surround yourself with the right people, join masterminds, go to events, experience new, cities, towns, countries, all that sort of stuff. Like, just, you ain't that smart, whoever you are, and just, continue to learn, really, at the end of the day.
Sage, I love it. Great advice. Chris Ducker, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was all my pleasure. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers, Chris.